if we're all made in the image of God,
yeah,
God is not only a skinny white woman. No. And so it really digs into, okay, well, let's talk about different cultures of origin. Let's talk about people who maybe don't look like us and what health looks like for them, what body ideal looks for them. Not because we're striving to be a particular body ideal, but because we have got to start recognizing the image of God in all bodies, all shapes, all sizes, all colors. And when we start to do that, I think that we can honor and respect diversity in that, and also diversity in our own size as it compares to something that we think we're supposed to look like.
I am Sherry Fletcher, and this is your spiritual game plan, change. It's something that happens to all of us. You've invested your time and energy into an important role, sometimes for years, and then suddenly it's time for you to move on. Maybe you've worked hard on a dream, and now your path is taking a new turn, but that dream isn't going with you. Perhaps you've raised your kids and they've moved on, but now your empty nest is filled with parent care. Or maybe you're in the middle of diaper changes and laundry piles. If you find yourself asking questions like, where do I fit in anymore? Am I even relevant? How do I find my purpose now? You are in the right place. This is the show for women in a season of transition. I believe that while your roles in life will change, your purpose is eternal. I'm here to help you understand just how intentionally you were made by a creator with a game plan. Together, we'll discover ways to help you unlock the purpose God's placed in you, develop a game plan for your life's calling, and embrace the intentional masterpiece you were created to be. I am really excited to have my friend Amy Connell back today as we are celebrating the launch of her first book, Your Worthy Body. I could not be more proud of Amy because I have been able to watch and admire this process as she has been writing this book, and she has really gone above and beyond for you guys in this book. Amy is on a mission to encourage women to release the pursuit of that perfect body and strive for a balanced, sustainable health. She is a 16-year fitness professional, motivational speaker, trainer, podcast host of Graced Health, and now we are so excited to add author to her title. Let's just get started with this book party. Amy, I am so excited to have you back. How are you today?
I am great, Sherry. Thank you so much for inviting me back.
So we are saying having each other back and seeing each other again because you were on my show in March of 2020. And I had such a great response to your message. So I knew I needed to bring you back because we are sharing about the book that is just launching, and I'm so excited. Yay! So in fact, back in March, when we did the first podcast, you had just shared with me privately that you were going to say yes to the calling of writing this book. And here we are.
Here we are, a mere, 18 months later.
Hey, 18. Wow, that's actually pretty good. That's pretty amazing.
Well, that's also partly due to the self-publishing process. I have a little bit more control over that.
That is true. So before we dive into this new book called Your Worthy Body, for those of you that did not hear us in March, tell us a little bit about yourself and about the ministry that you share.
Thank you. Yes, I would love to. So I am a personal trainer who wants you to take a day off and a nutrition coach who wants you to enjoy dessert. I like to, yes, chocolate, especially if it's dark chocolate. Yes, I have a little bit different mentality and mindset than a lot of the fitness professionals out there. I have been a fitness professional for 16 years. I've been a nutrition and fitness geek for as long as I can remember. I used to do step aerobics in my thong leotards, and I'm so glad that trend died.
So a lot of people are.
Yes. And really, where I am now when in my ministry of Graced Health has been a very slow progression of God just chiseling my heart with regard to fitness, with regard to the food and the fuel that I put in my body, and particularly with regard to how I look at my body. Mm-hmm. So Graced Health is really a combination of equipping women with the science, with the exercise science, with the nutrition science, and covering that with scripture, with what God says about us, what he says in his word about food and how we're called to be. And then really doing that with an intention of grace, or maybe intention's not the right word, but doing that with grace, because we are not going to be perfect at this whole thing. Just like we're not expected to be in our walk with Jesus, we're not expected to be perfect. And of course we strive to be, but we are never going to be exactly like Jesus because there was only one. And Graced Health is really here to give women that grace in their health and let them know that their eating and their movement and their body don't have to be perfect, because that, I think, in my belief, is where we start to feel shame. We start to feel like we're not worthy. We start to feel like whatever we're doing is not enough. And I'm just here to share my journey because I have been there, and to hopefully walk alongside women and let them feel the same way.
That is awesome. I love that. The first time I talked to you and I heard you talking about that, I'm like, where have you been? I need this so bad.
Well, I wasn't there either, Sherry. That's the thing. I mean, I think you and I probably have had very similar paths. And I think, God started guiding me in that. And now that's where I'm passionate. It's funny. One of the endorsers separately in an email, he said, your passion oozes from these pages. And it's because I want people to feel that grace and to feel the freedom in their health, however that is and however that may look like. So I wasn't there because I wasn't there. That's why I wasn't there with you.
Yes, I love that. I love that. Yes, your passion does ooze from everything you do, and you're sharing this convicted message is just coming out. And I love that. So the next question I'm going to ask, because I ask it of everyone.
And because I listen. Yes.
Oh, thank you. And I asked it of you back in March, but I'm wondering when I'm asking it again, if there's something additional you can add to it. So the question, looking back on your life, how far back can you see the very person you are today and who you have always been?
Yes. Well, I love the challenge of that question, especially answering it again, because it has encouraged me to think a little bit more broadly. I think when we first spoke, I shared about the path of writing a book, I think. And as I dig into this a little bit more, and I think back to my time on the playground or my time, showing off, which I don't like to think that I show off anymore, but I have always loved moving my body and feeling strength in my body. I remember on the playground sprinting with friends, and just saying, and I was like, oh, I'm super fast because I sprint. Well, who knows if I was fast or not? I don't know, but I loved that feeling. And I loved the feeling of breathing hard. I grew up dancing and I loved having just that awareness. And I don't know that I could have pinpointed it back then, but really being able to feel connected with my body and moving through space is a gift that I realize now not everybody had, whether or not it's because they just weren't aware of it, or because they played soccer, or because they didn't have the financial means to do it. I mean, I certainly understand the privilege of that, but I think having that background has allowed me to be connected with my body, which has allowed me to step into this role of encouraging women as I train them and as I teach them, either, through the words or through, my socials or whatever it is that I'm doing, that it's okay. Well, how are you feeling? And do you feel this muscle getting stronger? Do you feel this muscle getting fatigued because we're working it? And so I think that connection is something that I had growing up and has been a part of who I am now and what I do now.
I love that. I didn't have that growing up because I am so uncoordinated. I'm getting better.
I bet you're more coordinated than you think you are.
I try, but so it is November. We're having a book party for you. Congratulations. I'm so excited because, like I mentioned, the very first time we met, And we kind of talked about, have you written a book? Are you going to write a book? It seemed kind of like it was a down the road dream.
Yes.
And so here we are talking about your book a couple years later. So what was it that confirmed in your heart that this is the time that you needed to publish a message?
Sherry, it's funny. We met face to face in November of 2019 at a speakers conference.
Yeah.
And at that conference, it was a small, intimate conference. I'm so sad that they're not having it anymore, but it was it was so fantastic. And she brought in an acquisitions editor or agent or something like that. And I'm sure that there were people who thought, okay, I'm going to get 15 minutes and lined everything out and was prepared. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I went in, I sat down and I said, I have this idea and just kind of told her my idea. And I said, do you think it has any legs? And she said, yeah, I do. She said, put together a proposal and send it to me. Well, fast forward a few months and I started kind of dabbling in like, well, what would this look like? And how would I structure this? And so I kind of started writing it and then COVID hit. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I was inspired by a mentor who we both know, who said something. And then later she kind of retracted it, but she said, look, we are all home. This is anyone who's ever said they want to write a book. This is the time. Yeah. And since then she was like, okay, I did not realize that we are all in collective trauma. So maybe that wasn't the right time to say that. But for me and my family and my situation, I had 2 high schooler kids. I didn't work full time outside of the home. Like I had a lot of the elements that lined up that allowed me to focus a little bit more on that. And I understand that that's a privilege that not everybody had. But for me, that was kind of God saying, okay, let's go. It's time. I've been gearing you up. You've been doing this. You've been thinking about this since 2015. It's go time. So I just started focusing on that. And then here we are 18 months later.
I love looking at how the enemy tried to use COVID to shut us up, but it actually deployed us.
Yes. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
No, yeah. I mean, podcasts came out of it. Books have come out of it.
I've heard that there has been a huge influx of books that have come out of it for sure, which what a great way. I mean, between the podcasting, the books and the blogs and everything else. Yeah, we're getting more of the truth out there and we're getting better information. So yeah, you're right. It is. It has been, there are some lights in some really hard times for sure.
Yeah. And I think it's made us more comfortable getting up and speaking to people. I mean, Zoom, who did Zoom as often as everyone else has now? And now you're used to being in front of people and sharing. And so books are like, meetings, books, podcasts. I think the enemy tried, but nice try.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice try.
Nice try.
We have a spiritual game plan. It's not happening.
That's so true.
So when I started reading your book, the first thing, which I love, is the hook and the introduction. Like the introduction is like a hook. Like, this is so good. We could probably spend the whole podcast on just the introduction because I kept saying, oh, yes, this is me throughout the introduction. I like how you say health isn't just about looking a certain way. And it's not a list of do's and don'ts. It's not a static adjective like hot, fit, and perfect. It's a verb. It's a fluid behavior and attitude. That right there is just fabulous. I love that. And I'd love for you to share, how has your ideal health then changed as you've aged? And the concept of knowing that, it's not a static adjective. How has that changed as you've aged? And then lead that into your word health in exchange for agape.
Yes. Well, going back to many decades ago, I will say that all I wanted is a rockin' hot body. And I did everything I knew to do to get that. And specifically, I wanted to have abs that were so good that I could wear a belly button ring and be really proud of it.
Wow.
And I never did. Yeah. I think not unlike a lot of women our age, we grew up looking at the same body type, whether it be on magazines or commercials or televisions or billboards or whatnot. And thank goodness I didn't have all of the images that we see now through Instagram and social media and all of that kind of stuff. But for me back then, it definitely was something how I look. And as I have gotten older and as I have borne the let's see, what do we want to call the consequences of moving way too much, of being too restrictive, of trying to work off dessert, and all of the other things of the rules that I'm breaking in this book. I have realized that it's really more about how well I function, how I feel, how I'm able to do the things that God is wanting me to do. And not only now, but in the future. When I was 23, 24, 25, I quite honestly did not even care. Like, I wasn't even thinking about what I might want to do or how this might treat me when I'm in my 30s or 40s or 47, which is how old I am now. And now I'm thinking, okay, well, here, what I'm doing this morning, what I'm doing today, how is that going to treat me today? How is that going to treat me in my short-term goals, in how I want to feel later on today? But also, is that part of a well-rounded way of treating my body in the long term, and as I get older and as I age, and really just kind of moving that into more of a fluid assessment rather than something that is static. And so you mentioned agape. I have learned, and I really can't remember. I mean, obviously this was God who gave this to me, but in all of the different Bible studies, the agape love is that brotherly love and that caring for other people and just serving other people. And I started thinking, what if we swapped out the word agape for the word health? So agape, one of the different definitions that I found online was, and that I've quoted in the book, is agape love is unconcerned with the self and concerned with the greatest good of another. So then I thought, well, oh gosh, that kind of sounds like my new definition of health, which is taking care of ourselves so we can do what we're called to do. And I think that when we start taking away our health and the inward focus and focusing more on other people and focusing on how God wants us to be loving and serving others, it takes on a whole new meaning. And that to me has been the real game changer in Amy from 25 to Amy of 47 and hopefully Amy at 67 and beyond.
I love that. I've always said one of my goals is to be the grandma that runs a marathon with the grandkids.
Yes.
I've seen that. When I've been out running, I'm like, that is my goal. So hopefully, I'll be doing that. Hopefully I have grandkids, and if so, hopefully I can run a marathon with them.
Yeah. It's funny. One of my fitness mentors, Pete McCall, has said that he hopes to be in the senior Olympics running the 100-meter sprint. He was like, I've never done that. He said, but I just kind of want to train my body so that way when I'm 70, I can do it.
Yes.
Which I love that. I'm like, ooh, I may be there with you. That's a great idea. I love sprinting.
I do not love sprinting, but
you can do something else.
Yes, I'll do something else. But, and what's wonderful about my age is now I can be higher ranking in my age group.
Yes.
Well, when I'm in your age group, I'm low ranking. So there are a lot of books out there on health and fitness. It's a hot topic, especially as we're coming into the new year. You're going to be one of many that are coming into the new year. What is different? What makes your book not so typical?
Well, I will say this book is not for everyone. If someone is wanting to open up a book and get a step-by-step how to be healthy, step-by-step, what should I eat? How should I move? How often should I do it? This book is not for them. And that's what a lot of the books give. And that's great if that's what you need. But what I do is I spend the first portion of the book really focused on the mindset of why we want to be healthy. And some of that we talked about a little bit. But what I've learned about myself, Sherry, is I love distributing knowledge. I love teaching people. And then what I really love is when people can find, or they can learn that and then figure out how to use that wisdom and the discernment that God gave them to applying that to their own uniquely created God bodies. Oh, wow. That was a lot of words in the wrong way. Uniquely created bodies that God made them. And to me, that's why this is different. It is not a how-to book. It is not a step-by-step guide. It is let's step back evaluate why we want to be healthy, evaluate why we think we need to look a certain way. And then here are some tools and resources based off of the rules that we have thought that we needed to live by, but we actually don't. And that will give readers the freedom, the grace, the empowerment, and the equipment to go out and figure out what is the best way for them to move, because you and I even are different. You're not coordinated. I am coordinated. You love, you don't like sprinting. I love to sprint, and that's okay. You love the long distance stuff. I'm not so much. I don't want to run a marathon with my grandkids, Sherry. No, but I'll sprint with them. So that's why it's different. And I think honestly, the people who are opening it up looking for a how-to guide, they're going to be disappointed. But if the people who open it up or who are ready for something different, and they're ready to hear a different perspective on movement, on their eating or their fueling and their body, then those are the people who I think are going to really cherish the words that are in here.
That is so good. And I, just from knowing you and listening to your podcast and now reading your book, there's a freedom. There's a freedom in giving myself that grace and saying, it's not about depriving myself and starving myself. And then I feel like, oh, I wish I could have it, but I can't because then I'm going to look this way or that way. It's like, how is that going to make me feel in a couple hours? I'm not thinking of it as setting a standard or looking a certain way. It's just been a freedom to say, okay, I'm going to want to live this way forever. So just give myself that grace. I just love the concept. And I love the format that you wrote this book in because it's kind of like a way that we should incorporate our workouts. And speaking of mindset, you start out with like warm up, and then you have get her done, and then you have cool down. And so let's look at warm up, because you just mentioned it's a mindset. And I love that. And I know when I was younger, I didn't warm up. No. But now I have to warm up or I'm going to be hurting. I'm going to pay for it. So you kind of do the metaphor of a warm up in this process. So explain that warm up mindset.
Yes, you could have put me anywhere and I could have jumped in and I could have gone for it and it was great. And I never had any, ill consequences or anything like that. And boy, I definitely am that way now. I mean, again, the sprint workouts that I've been doing, I probably warm up longer than I actually do the workout because I just don't want to hurt myself. But yes, so I have to give full credit to one of my editors. Her name is Andrea Barilla. And she really helped me with coming up with the format of this book and really getting the mindset down first. That's because, again, I'm asking everybody to think a little bit differently here. I'm asking you to break some rules that you have felt like you had to live by for maybe your whole life, maybe your whole young adult life, maybe just recently, if, for the person who is just now like, man, I just kind of need to take care of myself. And then they're inundated with all of these different rules and all of these different things to do. And so I really wanted to capture our starting line and our foundation. And that's why we decided to call it a warm up, because we really kind of needed to warm up those minds. Just like I need to go out to the track and I need to walk around and then I need to do a light jog and I need to, slightly move my muscles. We're kind of stepping into some hard things for our minds to deal with regard to the way we move, and particularly our body. I really get into a lot of the body image stuff in that first section, because I think for a lot of us, the way that we look has driven how we take care of ourselves. And I'm asking the reader to maybe not focus as much on that, because that's part of the journey that I have been. Yeah. So I use the first few chapters to talk about that. I mean, the first chapter is I have to look a certain way. And the very first question is quick, think of an image that you think you're supposed to look like, which I think we all have.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I get into, things like, one of the titles is Your Body Works for You. And these are all things I have seen. These are all quotes and phrases. And there was a prominent fitness professional who said that. And I'm not shaming that. I'm just saying that sometimes we take these little snippets and we take it a little bit too far. Yeah. We talk about, yes, we want to do unto others, but also we've got to execute some self-care. Another thing that I dig into is our body image with regard to how we've grown up and what we have seen. So as a white girl who was born in 1974, most of the images I saw were skinny white women.
Yeah.
And guess what? If we're all made in the image of God, God is not only a skinny white woman.
No.
And so it really digs into, okay, well, let's talk about different cultures of origin. Let's talk about people who maybe don't look like us and what health looks like for them, what body ideal looks for them, not because we're striving to be a particular body ideal, but because we have got to start recognizing the image of God in all bodies, all shapes, all sizes, all colors. And when we start to do that, I think that we can honor and respect diversity in that, and also diversity in our own size as it compares to something that we think we're supposed to look like.
I love that. That is so true. And I think one of the reasons your program and your message is so different from others is I'm going to say this. I believe really strongly that a lot of the programs that people start in the new year fail because they didn't do a mental warm up. They weren't ready to really embrace the wholeness of health, the health message as a whole. They jump in ready to do the quick lose 10 pounds, lose 5 pounds by tomorrow. And they didn't warm up. They didn't really address the whole underlying issue of why they're even looking to get healthier. And so they quit because they didn't warm up. So I just love that whole concept of it. Last time we talked about caring for our bodies, like you just said, because our bodies need to work for us so that we can do what we're called to do. But in this book, you say that we're called to do different things. In fact, you list 5 different callings that we can be asked to do with our bodies. So tell us a little bit about those.
Yes, probably this is not all encompassing, but these are just the ones that God gave me. So those are the ones, those are the ones that I leaned into. But yeah, I think that there is a perception that if we are, people will hear, oh, well, I'm just called to do this, or God is calling me to do this. And there are always these big, huge, grand scheme plans. And that might be that way. But I think that there's also other ways of looking at callings and looking at how God might want us using our bodies to love and serve others. And so some of the ones that I think maybe don't get enough credit, but should are, and that I have in there, like one of them is creative callings. So here's an example. This morning I was scrolling on my Facebook feed, and I'm a member of just a community moms Facebook group. And there was a post on there that this woman said, hey, I cooked an extra lasagna. I know it's last minute. She posted this last night. I know it's last minute, but does anyone want this for dinner? And what a blessing that was to give. I mean, just, like, hey, here it is. So that's somewhat of a creative way, but those are little bitty, creative callings are small ways that we can use the uniqueness of how God made us to bless other people. Yeah, maybe that is hosting people with, for dinner. And, some people, like my mom, for example, my mom is so great at like making presents and packaging things. And that is to me, that is a creative calling. And let me tell you, when I have my book launch party, I've already put my mom in charge of doing the little gifts and the gift bags for people, because that's a blessing. So what are some of the small ways? Maybe you sew, maybe you knit, you paint, all of these different ways that you can bless other people, because what may seem very mundane or normal to you is a huge blessing to other people. Right. There are seasonal callings. This one I think is important because we may be, and you and I talked about this a little bit on the last episode, we may be called to do, God may be wanting us to do something for a time and then move on to something else. And maybe that was a PTO, being part of the PTO with our kids' school, or maybe that was working in the corporate world and then moving out and doing something different. And, this is where a lot of the spiritual game plan comes in, right? Because God has that purpose for us, and it doesn't mean it's going to be the same thing for all of our life. So allowing ourselves to shift as God shifts us with the seasons that we're in. Another one is a servanthood calling. This one is kind of like Aaron. And this, I have to attribute this to a lesson that one of my pastors gave at the church, but Aaron was right alongside Moses, and Aaron held up Moses's hands. Aaron was a mediator. Aaron had all kinds of roles that supported Moses in freeing the Jews, but he didn't get as much of the credit. And not that Moses was doing it for credit, right? because Moses didn't want to do it in the first place.
No.
But he doesn't get as much of the accolades or whatever, because it was really Moses who had that, free my people. So sometimes sometimes God wants us supporting someone. And there is so much value in that, because without that support, the other person wouldn't be able to do what God is calling them to do. Another one is micro calling. So these are ones that I would say are kind of those smaller ones. This is the example I give a lot is what I have for lunch is going to dictate how I'm going to be able to be productive in the afternoon. Because if I have a whole bunch of sugar or just things that don't work well for my body, then I'm going to be tired. I'm going to want a nap. Or maybe it's just little bitty things that it's that listening to the Holy Spirit and responding. Hey, call that person. Hey, text that person, reach out, go take this person to lunch, and just being able to do those little bitty things. And again, we've got to have the clarity. We've got to have the physical readiness to be able to do those small things. And even though they seem small, they're big because they are being obedient to God. And then the last one is those macro callings. That's the Moses and the burning bush. Those are the ones that people hear, but in my opinion, it has of equal importance to the other four. And I will leave it up to God if there are more other, if there are others out there. I certainly may not have captured them all, but it's equally important for us to be able to do those big ones just as much as the small ones.
Yeah, those are awesome. And they're just right up in my wheelhouse, all those special callings. I love that concept. And I love the concept of having our body ready to answer the call.
Yeah.
That is such a great concept. So in our last podcast, we talked about some of the rules around the health message that you like to break, or should I say shed some light on them so that truth can be heard.
Yes.
And, I'm going to have links to that podcast so people can go back and listen to the 8 rules. And there's a download with links in the show notes. But I would love it if you would share 1 or 2 of those rules that are not helpful. And then what can we do to give ourselves room for grace?
Yes. Boy, whittling down some of those is a little difficult for me.
Yeah, I know.
But I would say one of the ones that I hear a lot that makes me cringe, it's almost like fingernails on a chalkboard to me, is no pain, no gain. I think a lot of us have heard that.
Yes.
I don't think that people who say it are intending to be harmful. They're intending to be encouraging. They're intending to help push you through. But pain is not okay. Pain is our body's way of saying, this is not working for me, or I have been used too much, or you need to move in a different way. Pain is part of our body's communication method to us. So when we push through that pain, then we're really going back to the callings and going back to being able to do what God is calling us to do. We are disallowing ourselves to respond to the pain. And let's say, I'm not wording this very well, but we're basically not honoring our body,
right,
and how it wants to move and how it is asking to. So, no pain, no gain is a really big one. Now, the one differentiation I make in the book is hard is not pain. So I'm okay if you have a hard workout. I'm not saying don't go out there and work hard if that's something that you love to do. I love right now running so hard that I just want to put my hands on my knees and breathe really hard, not throw up. That's another rule to break, by the way. You should not need to throw up during the workout. You can read about that one. But just that feeling of hard. So that is fine. But pain is our body's way of telling us something. So that is one of them. Another one that I think is really common in women who have grown up maybe in our generation is this, I have to get my hour of exercise in.
Yes.
Your eyes got really big with that one.
Yes.
Yeah, we have had that mindset, and I don't really know where it came from. My theory is a lot of it came from those 55 minutes group fitness classes of like, you go in there and you've got to get that 55 minutes in. And if they let you out at 52 minutes, then you were really irritated because you were shorted 3 whole minutes of workout or of exercise. And honestly, as you get older, you don't need to work out a whole hour. It's more important to have maybe shorter workouts and then fill your movement with what's called NEAT, that non-exercise activity. It's non-exercise activity thermogenesis, but it's just movement that's not formal exercise. We don't, if we go and work out really, really hard with that no pain, no gain mentality for an hour every single day, we are going to get hurt. Yep. Maybe that wasn't the case when we were in our 20s and early 30s. It is the case now, and it makes a big impact on your life. And then again, going back to the mindset of it all, how do we want to feel later? Because if we're tearing down our body with 55 minutes or an hour of working really, really hard, then we're not equipping ourselves to be able to do what God calls us in the future. So those are a couple of them. And again, one of the chapter titles is Pass the Bucket. Which is, it is not, people absolutely throw up when they work out hard, but oftentimes it's preventable. So I give you the tools to be able to do that.
That's awesome. Well, you give us a lot of tools in your book, and your book is it's pretty forward. And I think that's a thank you to 2020, because you have recipes and doable workouts at the end of each chapter, but you have a QR code at the end of each chapter that they can scan, and you have all these resources that you have in the book, but they're also now on a free online library. And I just think that is so awesome. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, I had no idea that would be such a big portion of the book, but honestly, it's one of the things that I'm the most proud of. Going back to the beginning of our conversation, Sherry, when we talked about how this is a little bit different, what I'm wanting to do is give people the tools, give people the resources, the knowledge, the information, and then have it work for them. Mm-hmm. What I recognize, though, is sometimes there's a lot of that. So what I decided to do was create an online video library. It's free. As long as you get the book, you can scan the QR code. It'll take you there. And that has every single resource, plus a couple little bonus ones that are listed at the end of every chapter. I have 22 chapters. I think 19 of them have resources. Some of them are journaling. Some of them are just kind of checking in with how our blood work is and that kind of stuff from our doctor. Some of them are recipes. I do have workouts in there. I have 5-minute warm-ups and 5-minute cool downs. And I just wanted there to be one easy space. On my podcast, I say Grace Health is here. The podcast is to give women simple and grace-filled ways to take care of themselves. I wanted it to be simple. So you scan the QR code, you go on there, you can download all of the recipes. You can watch the videos with me. You can do the workouts with me until you get tired of me. And then you can go back because you will. And that's okay. I'm a little corny and cheesy, so that's fine. Get tired of me. Do them so much you get tired of me. That's fine. And then you can go back and see the words, and that is a printable one as well. So that way you're not going through and flipping through everything and trying to find it. It's all in one space. And I'm really proud of how that's coming along. I have 32 demo movements of different movements that I suggest in the workouts. And then you're like, well, I don't know how to do good mornings. Well, I show you how in them with very easy equipment. So I recognize not everybody has a fully stocked gym. And what I do is I show everything with either dumbbells or resistance bands, because you can do so much with those bands. So that has been a really fun and challenging part to put together of this book.
It's great. I've loved, even on your Instagram, you get on and do, 15-minute or 5-minute, 10-minute. It was like, okay, I'm not alone. And plus we get to see your dog, Grace. Every now and then she comes in and pops
My
in.
sidekick.
Yes. Awesome. So we are cooling down. So we're going to go to the cool down section of your book. Let's talk about losing weight, because I'm one of those who did gain the COVID-19, as they call it. I've lost 6 pounds of that, and I'm dedicated to losing the rest, but it never goes away as fast as, everyone wants it to. And there are days you get discouraged, days you feel like why even bother? I'm just going to, eat this bowl of ice cream anyway, because, it makes you feel good for 5 minutes. So I would love it if you give me some advice on my journey during this weight loss, and then share that wonderful cotton candy analogy that you
Yes. And the cool down. It's funny. The cool down portion of this book is not nearly long enough, which is probably, it's telling of the cool downs. I'm not great about cooling down in my own workouts. So I wish it's like, this is so perfect because I never cool down enough in my own workouts. So I've been better about it. Yeah. I mean, I would say, Sherry, in that example, boy, I think so many people can relate to that. And we feel that. And it's funny when you say it's not coming off fast enough. What I would say to that is you're doing it right, because that means that you are taking your body in a gentle pattern of allowing it to start burning your stored energy, which is your adipose tissue, for fuel. Because when we do that too drastically, that has some other consequences and that has other side effects. So when you say it's not coming off fast enough, I say that probably means you're doing a really good job of it.
Oh, good.
I would, yeah. And again, then I would go back to, let's talk about the mindset behind why you're wanting to lose weight. One of the first things I would say is, what's your why? And when you were saying, some of these beginning of the year, just going to jump in and do things, you've got to figure out your why. You've got to figure out that intrinsic motivation rather than an extrinsic number on the scale or being a certain size or, anything else other than that. It's what's driving you to do that. And it might be something as simple as, like, for me, I don't want to snore in the middle of the night. Yeah. That's one indication of me that I'm like, maybe I've had a little bit too much chocolate, or something like that. And then I would encourage you to think about, well, how are you influencing the people around you? Because people notice what you're doing. They are motivated by what you're doing, even if you're not intentional about it, but they'll hear you say, oh yeah, I got up early and I walked, or I did my Pilates, or, my bar class or something like that. And that kind of thing has a lot more influence, for moms who have young kids. Those kids watch. I have a client who has a 4-year-old daughter, and her daughter kind of joins in with us. And that's a lot of fun. And her daughter notices, and then they have pretend workouts with her and her sibling. So those are the kinds of things that I think are really important to remember. Now, from a physiological standpoint, a couple things that I would encourage you to do is, number one, take the focus off the scale, and maybe you have,
I don't stand on a scale.
Yes.
No,
yeah.
I don't like them.
No, they're not, because they only tell us one small metric of our health. It only tells us one thing, and that is, what is the gravitational pull of our body toward the earth? And it does not indicate anything else in terms of what true health is, which, that's all other things, right? Like, that's your blood work and your cholesterol and how well you're sleeping and how your mental health is and all of that kind of stuff. So I would say take that focus off of the scale and notice how your body is responding to what you're doing in other ways. Can you move better? Do you have more energy? Are you sleeping better? All of those are a really great driver, and they can be a continual motivator when we are stuck in that rut. And I get it. Like, I've been there too. Like, oh gosh, I just kind of feel like I need to reset. It's taking forever. Why do I bother? So yeah, you're definitely not alone. Now, the cotton candy example is, I don't know how I came up with that. Again, God, but this is, I had to get my notes out because it involves math. And even though I have a finance degree, I'm not very good about doing all the math in my head. But basically, if you were to take a bag of cotton candy, that is all sugar and food coloring, right? And it's all been fluffed up. And I don't know how they do it, but it's all been fluffed up. And if you were to go to your local, I don't know, where do they even have cotton candy? The rodeo. I live in Houston, Texas. So the rodeo, I know that they have it there, or the circus or whatever. And you were to bring that home, open it up, bring it home, and let it set on the counter. Give it about, 5 days or so. And you're going to see that big fluffy thing of cotton candy has shrunk to just a little bit of space. Now, the sugar in that cotton candy, the sugar in the big fluffy stuff, and then in the shrunken part is the same. So I would equate that to like a sugar cube. So there are approximately, in one bag of cotton candy, 17 teaspoons of sugar. 17 teaspoons big and fluffed up is the same as 17 sugar cubes. And I would say that is the difference, or that is an analogy of adipose tissue, which is our stored energy. Some people use body fat. I tend to stay away from that because it can drum up all kinds of negative feelings. But add 17 teaspoons of, or the equivalent of that, of your adipose versus muscle. So your scale may not change at all, but if you have been strength training, if you have been moving your body in different ways, if you have been feeling that state of soreness and the scale is not moving, it may be that you are growing muscle, which is helping to burn off that adipose, and your body may be transforming and feeling the positive effects of what you're doing, but the scale may not reflect that, which is why I really discourage people from having that as the one and only tool that we use.
I do like that. And luckily I don't like cotton candy. So I'm eating that.
I don't either. I used to, and now I'm like, whoa.
I do like the visual. It was like, oh, wow, that makes sense. So as we're ending our time, I'm sure your message to my listeners is it's time to go home or go hard, right?
No, no, go hard or go home. No.
Okay. So, I love all the questions that we were talking about today, things that, doing what we're doing now for our body later and thinking of it even as preventative. But there are some things that it can go both ways. We can either do something super hard today or we can do nothing at all. Right. It goes both ways to be drastic, either super hard and pushing it or ignoring our health altogether and not doing anything because it is too hard. So I'd love you just to share a little bit about your concept on the go hard or go home.
Yeah, I think that there definitely is that mentality. And I think that people often feel frozen in not knowing what to do, so they don't do anything. And that is one thing that I'm really hoping that this book gives them is, again, the information that to be able to move and what they and how they want to do that. And I would say it does not have to look a certain way. The best way to exercise is that one that you will do consistently. And that might be that at first, it's just putting on your shoes and lacing up your shoes and going for a walk. And that is great. It does not have to be go hard every single time. And again, physiologically, that's not what's best for our body anyway. I want you to take a day off. I want you to take a rest day, a physical rest day, and give your body some recovery and your mind, quite honestly, some recovery time. So this is not intended to get you all motivated to go to the gym and bang it out and slam your face against the wall and do 1,000,000 burpees or run sprints or whatever that is, right? It's intended to give you the knowledge so that way you can figure out how to incorporate that realistically and sustainably into your life. And that's going to look different for everybody. You and I talked about the differences in how we like to move, and that's great. God made us differently. Though if I ever get to see you again, we're definitely going on a walk.
Yes, for sure.
But yeah, I would say, my encouragement for women and for any of the listeners would be, it doesn't have to be perfect. That's one thing that I say at the very end of the book. Your eating and your movement and your body, they don't have to be perfect. You just need to be able to do what you're called to do in a sustainable way. So that way you can love God and love others.
I love that because you're worth it.
You are worth it. You are worth it. Yes.
Thank you so much for taking time out, and congratulations on this book that has just come out, and it's time for Christmas ordering for gifts. And this would be an awesome, awesome Christmas gift. So thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been so much fun, Sherry.
Amy's message of loving the body that God gave you and being able to break the rules that society tells us are for a one-size-fits-all has been the grace I needed to give myself. Ways to connect with Amy and buy her new book, Your Worthy Body, are in the show notes. You can also find links to connect with Amy at gracedhealth.com. During today's podcast, did a friend or family member come to mind who you thought would enjoy the message? Then please share it with them. You can simply share the link or forward my email with them with a message like, "Hey, I thought of you while I was listening to this podcast. I thought you would enjoy listening to it, and here's why." Listeners like you sharing links with others is how this podcast can reach more people. Thank you so much for tuning in to Your Spiritual Game Plan, the podcast that helps you understand that God has a plan and you have a purpose in it.